Hello, I'm Lindsay Nisley, and I'm going to present to you today on building belonging in college students. So let me share my screen here. Okay, I'm a continuing lecturer at Oaks College in the writing program at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I've been working on different interventions to build belonging in students for a long time. I've taught at Oaks College for 20 years, and it's been interesting to put that in context with some of the recent ongoing research about the importance of belonging and how we create belonging. So that's what I want to share with you. So first, I wanted to talk about what is belonging and why does it matter to us. Um, and I really like this quotation from Susie Wise, who wrote a book called Design for Belonging. And she says, belonging is the key that unlocks the best in everyone. So that's good for us to have in mind as we go forward here. Kids who feel they belong learn better in school. Elders with a sense of belonging stay healthy and aware. Immigrants who belong thrive in their new communities. Having a sense of belonging leads to flourishing in every environment and group, big and small, from your home to the culture at large. There was a recent 2024 national report assessing belonging, and that's called the Belonging Barometer. And in the Belonging Barometer, they describe the elements of belonging. Um, so, Belonging is a basic need, a basic human need, and it's can be a little bit hard to grasp. We know what the word means, but it's useful for us to have some definitions here. So these are some elements of belonging: feeling emotionally connected, feeling welcomed and included, perceiving that one is able to influence decision making, feeling able to be one's whole and authentic self, being valued as a person and for one's contributions, being in relationships that are as satisfying as one wants them to be, feeling like an insider who understands how the environment works, and that's key for students adjusting to college, feeling comfortable expressing one's opinions, being treated equally, and feeling that one truly belongs. So that can help us start thinking about times when you have felt belonging, times when you haven't felt like you belonged, and especially connected with your experience of schooling and as instructors, how we can build a sense of belonging because it's a really critical part of the college experience. This is a great image for us, also from Susie Wise's Design for Belonging. And it helps us to conceptualize this sense of belonging that we'd like to foster in our students and then also notice in ourselves. So, how does belonging feel? Being seen and heard, being alive, being a part of something, being honest, being comfortable, experiencing validation, being in a good place, and being invited. So these are elements that we can think about making a critical part of our classrooms, in person or online. These are all elements that we can increase the sense of in our students. So why is it important for instructors to build student belonging? I'm taking some quotations here from a great book called Relationship Rich Education from 2021. And I recommend that everyone read it when you have time. And it's interesting to think about relationships as being a central element of especially a successful educational experience for students. So that's the premise of the book. And they also talk about belonging. So they say belonging is a basic human need that takes on heightened importance in certain context, such as when joining a new community, so like coming to college, and for certain populations, particularly those who are marginalized. Research illustrates that students' sense of belonging is a consequence of mattering, of sensing that they're respected and cared about, and that their presence and contributions make a positive difference to a particular community. The classroom's the primary point of contact between institutions and undergraduates, so it's the single most important site for students to experience these elements of belonging, which I think are important for us, experiencing welcome and care, to be inspired to learn, to build webs of relationships, so with instructor, with teaching assistant, and also among themselves, and to ask questions of meaning and purpose, right? Why are we doing this work? Why does it matter? Why are we here? What is this leading to? So Greg Walton, who's a Stanford researcher who's done a lot of um, studying and writing, publishing on belonging. He says that as instructors, it is our job to create ways of thinking, cultures, and personal relationships that make school a place of genuine belonging. So, thinking about how we can do that at our respective institutions. And Walton and then his colleague Cohen did a study in 2011 that has since been replicated. The data has been replicated many times. And what they were looking at is that their results suggested that inequality between marginalized and non-marginalized groups arises not only from structural factors, but also from concern about social belonging. So they were examining um, just how important was belonging for students adjusting to college. And they created a brief social belonging intervention, and it was so powerful that it improved the academic performance, self-reported health, physical health, and the well-being of ethnic minority students over 3 years. So they came back and checked in on the health and well-being of the students and academic performance. And it actually became a protective measure. The students made so many connections due to this one brief intervention. They found mentors and their professors on campus. They connected with other people, that the one intervention actually had really far-reaching, far beyond 3 years, really far-reaching impact. So, and it's since been used at 40 colleges. So they created kind of this really important, although very easy, intervention, and then have proven that it really matters. It really had an impact. So, students' well-being and performance may depend to a great extent, maybe much more than we realize, on whether they construe setbacks as evidence that they do not belong. So, this is also moving from a fixed mindset to more of a growth mindset, right? So, our interpretation of what setbacks mean. Is this the right place for me? Everyone else seems to be doing well except for me. We tend to personalize setbacks as opposed to seeing them as a universal part of adjusting to college, for example. So, this intervention provided students with a narrative that framed social adversity in school as shared and short lived. So this happens for everybody. You'll begin to adjust, which encourage students to attribute adversity not to fixed deficits unique to themselves or to their ethnic group, but to common and transient aspects of the college adjustment process. So it was sort of a perspective shift. And this provided students a non-threatening frame for interpreting the daily challenges of school. And Cohen, the co author, wrote that this study's message sought to make people feel less like a ship lost at sea and more like co travelers taking the first steps on a journey full of possibility. The stories that they were sharing in this intervention turned uncertainty about belonging into a basis of connection rather than shame. And so the intervention itself was that students were reading messages or letters from students who had been in their place, in their shoes, the year before. So they were sort of reading recommendations, advice, guidance from older students, normalizing and validating their experience of adjustment. And then the students who reviewed these messages, so who received the messages, were empowered, felt empowered to write essays and record videos about their own experiences to share with the next round of incoming first years. Because students get better grades when they give academic advice to peers, and that's proven. So, by encouraging students to adopt this message as their own, the intervention made this message stick psychologically. And so what that meant was when the students, it helped the students to internalize the message about adjustment is hard. It's not me. I belong here. It's the adjustment process that's difficult. And then when they passed that on, when they shared that message to other students, it was really empowering and had this far-reaching impact, closed up achievement gaps, and had a measurable impact even a decade later. So how can instructors build belonging, right? We've seen what belonging is, why it's important, the far-reaching impact of doing even a brief belonging intervention in class. Um, In relationship-rich education, the authors say student-faculty interactions are the single most significant factor in positive educational outcomes for students of color and are also especially significant for first-generation students. And that's the population that I'm working with at Oaks College at UC Santa Cruz. Most of our students are students of color, and many of our students are first-generation college students. And they also caution, because they didn't want to scare instructors away thinking that we had to do an enormous amount of extra work. So they cautioned us that instructors don't need to go beyond their professional role to support student well-being. They just need to give more attention to the social dimensions of learning that are within their role. So looking more at how you're building connections with students, between you and the student, and also supporting students to build connection among one another. So giving more attention to the social dimensions of learning that are within our roles as instructors. So here are a number of different instructional interventions that you can do to increase your student's sense of belonging. You may already be doing a number of these things, which is fabulous. But this is a helpful list for us to work from, because each of these things, I share information with you on how to do some of these things. In my resource folder at the end of our presentation, you'll have access to that. And these are things that maybe you've thought about doing but never have before. So this can be helpful for us to see, oh, these small gestures, these small interventions can really make a difference. So posting a welcome letter or recording a welcome video on Canvas or whatever your learning management system is helps students feel invited and they feel a connection with their instructor when you do that. Assigning a project or survey where students introduce themselves to you. So in a large class, you could do a kind of an introductory survey. Sometimes instructors make these anonymous, because students give different feedback when it's anonymous. Or assigning a introductory letter where they tell you something about themselves or they write a "This I Believe" essay to let you know about their morals and who they are. Implementing daily check-ins and diversifying small group conversations in order to deliberately create community. And so I have included some suggestions for check-ins and community building exercises in the folder of resources that you'll have access to at the end of the presentation. So taking some time in each class to build the feeling of being in a learning community together. And then collaborating on community agreements or guidelines for class discussion that helps students feel like they have some say in the climate of the classroom and how it's run. And there's some great resources for creating guidelines for class discussion. Offering incentives for attending office hours. So this is for you as well as teaching assistants. We offer open office hours at the start of the quarter for our first year students to encourage them to drop in, just stay and say hi. You can do this online by offering great incentives like extra credit. You can do this in person by offering food incentives. Like we have chips and snacks that encourage students to just stop by and say hi. Just that moment of connecting one-on-one with an instructor makes a difference in their feeling of belonging. Including readings and discussions about adjustment, belonging, and imposter syndrome. So, naming these issues helps the students see how common they are and how widespread the feelings that they're having are among their peers and then among everyone who's ever adjusted to college. Bringing it into the conversation instructionally can be really helpful. Checking in on students in brief one-on-one meetings or midterm reflections. So some instructors will say, we'll schedule 10-minute conferences to get to know each student. They share their background, you share yours, you make some connections with them. That can be really helpful. Midterm reflections can be a time where they talk about if they have missing assignments or work and what their plan is to make that up. It can be a useful check-in to make sure everyone is accounted for and no one's falling behind in your class. Gathering students' advice about how to succeed and asking them to share it with others, as in the Walton and Cohen study that I was just referring to, has an enormously high success rate. And you can do something like ask them to contribute to a Google Doc at the end of the quarter, and say, what are your suggestions for succeeding in this class, and what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because then you share that with the students in the next iteration of the class, and it can be really helpful for them to see, oh, what I'm going through is normal and shared by everyone. Showcasing students' strengths and encouraging them to appreciate peers. So, noting when they did particularly good work on an assignment or celebrating them for their insights they're offering in class. This makes them feel like their voice matters and that they belong. Sharing stories of how you experienced and overcame belonging uncertainty, which is the term for when you aren't sure if you belong, and has a lot of overlap with imposter syndrome. So, your own stories matter to the students. So, just talking about what it was like for you to adjust to college, or for you to feel like a lone face in a big classroom of other folks. And then talking about how there were things you could do. You utilized resources, you found a faculty mentor, you were able to create connections with peers in your classroom, whatever it may be that helped you to adjust to college. It allows them to see that what they're feeling is normal, and also that it's not insurmountable. Here are some common student concerns that can be addressed through belonging interventions. So, um, the belonging questions here are, I'm just going to zoom in so we can see it. And this is from a study called The Many Questions of Belonging. So the belonging question is, people feel invisible. And the question is, does anyone here even notice me? And the remedy for that from the instructional perspective is to recognize and acknowledge people. And they give you some examples of how supportive letters are helpful, for example, in making people feel seen. And then the belonging worry is that people feel disconnected. And their question there is, are there people here whom I connect to? So, what we can do as instructors is facilitate a sense of personal connection to other people in a setting, right? Um, and facilitate a sense of working towards common goals with other people in a setting. So, putting folks in groups, maybe teams that they work with over the whole quarter or semester. That helps folks feel like they're connecting with others. And I put students in a lot of small groups based on things that they may have in common. So, similar birthdays, similar areas where they're from, etc. So, I have some suggestions for that for you in the resource folder, but thinking about how can you build connection into the classroom, sites for connection into the classroom. And people worry that they are devalued. So, their question is, do people here value people like me? So provide a narrative with which to understand common challenges in the setting so that they don't feel so personal. Broaden representations of who belongs in the setting, right? So their example here is increasing the representation of women in a math and science conference, increase women's anticipated belonging in the conference, and reduce threat and vigilance, right? So they're giving you some examples of studies that are showing us why this belonging intervention is effective. And representing specific institutional actions that could seem to threaten belonging so that they don't, right? So, um, encouraging teachers to adapt an empathic rather than a punitive mindset toward misbehaving students, increase students' respect for teachers, and reduce suspension rates over an academic year. So, thinking a little bit about changing the approach so that students feel as though they are valued. And then last, people devalue the setting. Is this a setting in which I want to belong? I have a lot of students after their first 3 weeks who decide they want to transfer. And it's because they're experiencing this worry about belonging. So, what we can do to remedy that is represent the setting as offering opportunities to pursue valued goals, right? And talk about why you're here, why you chose this school, how common it is for students to struggle with adjustment in the beginning, and that that's not a reason to leave the school. So I'm going to focus specifically on 3 interventions that I've developed to build belonging in the classroom. Each intervention can be adapted for use in online, hybrid, or in-person learning environments, depending on your modality. This intervention that's designed to build belonging is a think, pair, share reflection on adjustment. And I've utilized this on discussion boards on Canvas and in breakout rooms on Zoom, as well as in a hybrid setting. and also in person. So you're asking students to reflect on, and again, I'm teaching mostly first year students, although not all, but I'm asking them to reflect on what are you proud of in your adjustment to college so far? What are you doing well? So that recognizing and building on strengths. What are you struggling with in your adjustment to college so far? What's challenging for you right now? So kind of normalizing between the student and their partner. Um, that what's challenging for them is challenging for others as well, and it isn't a sign that you don't belong. And then a little bit of self-advice, right? So remembering that students do better when they offer advice to someone else. It puts them in this mode, sort of wisdom mode, where they're sharing about their perspective. So you ask them to give themselves a little advice based on your adjustment to new experiences in the past, such as when you started high school. What advice would you give yourself about what you're struggling with? What do you need to hear? So they're giving themselves um, pretty direct advice to think about how they could help themselves through this adjustment. So you're also asking them to consider these elements of college adjustment: academic, social, physical, and emotional, that each of those components is part of who they are as a person in college and also part of their adjustment. So seeing these examples even in the list here helps them to normalize and appreciate that the experience they're having is not about them not belonging, but is a shared or common experience. So that think, pair, share has been really effective for student to get a conversation going about shared commonalities in the struggle to adjust and belong. Another invention I designed to build belonging is to encourage students to navigate imposter syndrome together. And this is set up as a hybrid activity because I wanted to show you how that would work, but it can be done adapted for use online and also in person. So what I ask students to do, I have an asynchronous elements, then in-person elements, then reflective elements. So asynchronously, I have students read two brief articles, about half a page or page each, about imposter syndrome. So kind of defining it, getting everyone on the same page, understanding imposter syndrome, and particularly its impact on first generation students. And then post a response in an online discussion. They need to describe their own experience with imposter syndrome, give themselves guidance about how they could navigate their imposter syndrome. So, again, relying on their own funds of knowledge, their own expertise, using specific suggestions from the articles they read, right? So, referring back, using the sources, and then responding to other students' discussion posts about navigating imposter syndrome. So, engaging in a conversation about, oh, I had the same experience, or I didn't realize that, everyone in my math class felt this way, that kind of thing. Then the in-person elements, which can also be adapted to online, are in-class students choose an inspiring quote from one of their classmates' discussion posts and write it down with markers on brightly colored paper. Um, Students are encouraged to bring their creative selves into the classroom by illustrating their quotation. So they draw little pictures and use color, and they get excited about working with markers and colorful paper and tape. And because the last thing they do is to tape their illustrated quotation on the wall of our classroom and walk around admiring the artwork and reading the quotes. And those quotes often stay on the walls all quarter long. So that becomes our wallpaper in our classroom, as these inspiring quotations sourced from their own work about what advice they could give themselves to overcome their imposter syndrome. So the idea here is that we're really navigating it together. And then the reflective elements sort of help the activity stick psychologically. So students reflect online or in person about what they gained from this activity, thinking about how the hybrid format benefited their learning, right? Having some awareness about that, asking them, how did it feel to bring your creative self into the college classroom? It's not a site where you're often encouraged to draw or get creative about color or use of color, or where you're posting your quotation on the wall. Um, and then, how was this activity a helpful way to draw on your own funds of knowledge to successfully navigate imposter syndrome? So, some metacognition there about the experience itself. And then last is an intervention that's designed to build belonging, where I ask older students who are in a mentoring program that I run to create video recommendations for first years. So I asked the peer mentors, and those are second through fourth year students, to record 2 to 4 minute videos sharing their recommendations and experiences with first year students. So their audience is first year students. Students can record, post, and view the videos online so that this element of this experience can be entirely online. In their videos, mentors answer questions like these. What can you offer future first year students that no one else can? What do you have to offer that would be helpful for first years to hear? What do you wish you had known as a first year, first quarter student? What do you know now that you can share with them? So, thinking about giving tips on adjustment, academic success, and helping to speak directly to the first years and especially their feelings of homesickness or feeling that they don't belong, feelings of imposter syndrome. And then I give mentors these sentence starters to share their experiences, and this is included for you in the folder of resources. Um, they answer questions like, my experience has taught me, and then they fill in the blank, or what you can learn from me is that, and fill in the blank. Here are some things you can expect to be challenged by in your first year, and then they could list them. And then they say, here's how they handled them, right? And so this type of project is really substantiated by the evidence in Walton and Cohen's study and in its subsequent use in so many colleges. And it's quick, doesn't take very long. I assign these videos to my first years. They watch 3 of these per week, generally 2 to 3. And then they can write responses about it. We can talk about them in class. Sometimes I'll ask them at the end of the quarter, which was your favorite recommendation video? So it's a way for them to directly receive these kind of affirming messages of welcome and belonging, and then think about how it relates to their own experience. So, this is a sample of one of these video recommendations, my student mentor, Isaac. And he says in his video, I felt like I couldn't make it here on my own. It felt like a lot to get used to, a lot to take on. Utilize all the campus resources you can and don't be afraid to access them. And that's really important that students hear that coming not just from a faculty member, but from another student. And so it was useful for students to hear a video like this because then they think, oh, Isaac struggled too, or Isaac used campus resources as well. It encourages them to address their issues in a similar way. My peer mentor Carlos recorded a video message about adjusting to college, and it was really powerful. Students really respond to these videos from older students. So, one first year responded, Carlos said, I've learned that the worst that I can be told is no, and I have full power over how I let that word make me feel. And this first year student said, I really resonate with this. It's something I want to work on as part of my self growth because that is one of the main things that's holding me back from socializing. It's something I never thought of, and it's some great insight on how I can be a better me. And another first year student said, I can relate to Carlos's fear of rejection and breaking out of that by understanding that life will continue to occur even if you are rejected by someone. You need to be patient with how things are, even if they're not great, and to focus on the good things and the goals that you have. Everyone struggles with these things, and to know that I'm not alone and that there are ways to cope with these feelings is comforting. So, as you can see, these video messages, even though they're only 2 to 4 minutes long, have an important impact on our first year students and their feeling of belonging. In Hannah's video message, she talks specifically about imposter syndrome. And she said, I felt like everyone around me was doing so well, and I was just struggling. But I needed to remember I got into this school, and you all got into this school just like everyone else. And then she gives this message directly to the students watching. You belong here. No one deserves to be here more than you. You deserve to be here. All the resources are meant for you. So that's a really encouraging message for students to hear who maybe were hesitant about reaching out for tutoring, reaching out for counseling, connecting with other students in organizations, finding groups of like-minded individuals. So that was really helpful for students who responded to Hannah's video message about imposter syndrome. One student said, I found Hannah's recommendations the most helpful. I related to this video a lot. I got all A's in high school, but here I had gotten behind a bit and was starting to not get as good of grades. To me, that is pretty stressful. Although after watching this video, I did start to reach out in office hours to get some help. So that Hannah's video was just a little push, the encouragement that student needed to reach out and connect with a faculty member. Another first year responded in Hannah's video. She brought up imposter syndrome and highlighted how people can struggle and do struggle with anything. She also recommended taking advantage of resources, setting boundaries with roommates, and encouraged us to make connections, which is what I need to hear right now. In the future, I'll remind myself to do these recommendations by scheduling times in my schedule to email my counselors, therapist, and go to learning support services. I'll also start researching clubs and emailing them to make more connections. So you can see students do take these video suggestions to heart, and they help them in really increase their feeling of I belong here, even if I'm struggling or things are hard. So I have a folder of shared resources for you, and you can access these by scanning this link to the materials, and that's resources on belonging you can download and use. It contains some of the exercises and activities I described in this presentation, as well as lots of other resources, books, articles, online sites to help support you in creating and fostering a feeling of belonging in your students. Thank you so much. You can email me if you have any questions or want to talk further about creating belonging. Appreciate that you are here listening.